Hey, today I'm going to talk about a drama movie called Queen of Hearts. Welcome to the channel, hit subscribe, and let's jump right in. The movie follows Anne, a successful lawyer who works with young people and children who've been mistreated. She lives a fancy life with her husband Peter and their twin daughters in a modern house surrounded by a beautiful forest in Denmark. They are expecting Peter's teenage son from his previous marriage, Gustav, to come live with them. Gustav has been having trouble with his mom and needs a new start. What nobody knows yet is that Gustav's arrival is going to turn their lives upside down. The next morning, Gustav arrived. The family welcomed him and gave him some gifts. He was really shy. His mom had planned to send him to a boarding school and let him live on his own since she was very busy. However, Anne didn't think that was a good idea because she felt that type of school wouldn't allow him to have a normal life. So Peter suggested that his son should come and live with them instead. The plan wasn't for Gustav to stay with them forever, but just until he was old enough to legally live on his own back in Stockholm. The day after, when Anne got back from work, she found that only Gustav was at home. She tried to start a conversation with him to get to know him better, but he was still quite shy. That night, a girl who had been raped came to see Anne. She was scared and wanted to drop her case because she was afraid that no one would believe her. But Anne encouraged her to be brave and go ahead with the case, not just for her own sake, but for all the other girls who have gone through the same thing. The next day, when Anne got back from work, she walked into Peter and Gustav arguing. Gustav wanted his freedom and didn't want to live with them, but since he wasn't legally an adult yet, he had no choice. He was really upset about feeling controlled. Living together was tough at first, especially since it was their first time trying to be a family under one roof. Later on, we find out that the girl Anne was helping lost her court case. The court didn't believe her because she had been in several romantic relationships with different people over the past year, and they unfairly labeled her a liar. Anne came home feeling very let down by the situation. To make things worse, when she got home, she found out that thieves had broken into their house and stolen all their valuable things. 2 days later, Anne found the house key they had given to Gustav in his pants, which was odd because she remembered that a few days earlier, when she came home, she saw that he had thrown the key away. So she had picked it up and put it in her bag, planning to give it back to him, but then forgot about it. Her bag was stolen recently, and the key was supposed to be inside it. Being a smart lawyer, she suspected Gustav of robbing the house. She warned him about the police investigating, saying she could easily prove he was guilty. However, she offered him a deal. She wouldn't tell anyone about it as long as he agreed to truly become part of the family and improve his behavior. Gustav agreed immediately, and in fact, he started to really become part of the family. He began talking with his twin sisters more, and Anne was pleased. She found herself sharing in their activities, showing more interest in the family than before, when she was mostly focused on her work. After enjoying their day, they got home in the evening and found the girls already asleep. Gustav and Anne sat down and started chatting. Anne sensed that Gustav felt out of place, so she suggested he invite his friends over whenever he wanted, but he admitted he didn't have any friends, and neither did she. During their conversation, Anne complimented the tattoo on his arm. He offered to give her one, and although she initially declined, she eventually agreed. Gustav ended up tattooing her. From that moment, Anne found herself feeling unusually happy. Later on, she and Gustav went to a nightclub where they had some drinks. Despite the visible signs of aging on her face, Anne was determined to prove to herself that she could still attract a young man. That night, she decided to embrace a new mysterious chapter in her life, and impulsively, she kissed Gustav. When Anne returned home, Peter was upset with her for leaving the guests abruptly. However, Anne didn't pay much attention to his concerns. She was experiencing unusual feelings for Gustav that she couldn't ignore. One night, she couldn't sleep, so she went to Gustav's room and they started having an affair. She felt like she was losing control and risking everything for a teenager. She was confused and unsure about what to do. She was torn and unsure. Should she continue or end it? The next day, Anne bought Gustav a computer to help him with his homework. At work, she met a girl named Sarah who shared that her father drinks alcohol every day and is abusive. Anne encouraged her to report it to the police, but Sarah refused. When Anna got home, Gustav was with the twin girls and reading them stories. She decided to have a relationship with him, so she started an affair with a 17-year-old. She avoided her only fear, that everything she loved would suddenly disappear from her life. One day, they hosted a birthday party for their twin daughters. Everyone attended, and it was a joyful occasion. While Anne was alone, Gustav came up to her and kissed her. Suddenly, her sister saw what happened and told him to stay away from Anne. Anne then went to talk to her sister, who started blaming and scolding her, not appreciating the severity of what she was doing. This made Anne feel scared and as though she was losing grip on her life. This incident directly impacted her relationship with Gustav. She began treating him very poorly, which made him upset. In his anger, he climbed a tree and started throwing fruit at the party, embarrassing the family in front of all their guests. Anne realized then the troubled state of the teenager who had come into their lives and the harm she had caused him. Suddenly, he slipped from the tree and fell to the ground. Anne recognized the gravity of her actions. Meanwhile, Peter was angry and confused, unable to understand his son's behavior. Anne was put in a position where she had to choose between her career, her family, and Gustav. She proposed to Peter that they should move Gustav somewhere else, but Peter found it difficult to consider sending his son away like that. After all that had happened, it was crucial that they had a clear conversation. They met in the forest, where she explained to him that she knew their relationship would eventually end, but she hoped it wouldn't ruin anything. Indeed, things ended as they had agreed. They decided to keep their affair secret. However, Gustav was left feeling angry and insulted. Then Peter decided that he and Gustav needed a change of scenery and some rest, so they planned a trip to the country house. Meanwhile, Anne attempted to normalize things, especially with her sister Lena, but it was hard because Lena refused to speak to her. While driving home, Anne was overwhelmed with anxiety about potentially losing everything. This nervousness led to a car accident, but fortunately, she wasn't injured. When she got back home with her daughters, she found that Peter and Gustav had already returned. That night, Peter sat down with her to talk. He mentioned that Gustav had told him something unsettling. Anne felt nervous, but knew that Gustav had decided to enroll in a boarding school. Peter shared that he was glad because it meant he finally had the chance to spend time with his son. However, the mood shifted when Gustav broke down and confessed that he and Anne had been having an affair. When Peter confronted her, she denied it. Peter was almost driven to madness, unable to figure out who was lying. Anna tried to persuade Peter that Gustav was lying just to get attention. She became agitated, started screaming, and began packing her things to leave. Peter, trying to keep things calm and confused about what to believe, asked her why Gustav would lie about such a thing. Anne countered by urging him to ask his son about the robbery at their house. She managed to convince Peter that Gustav had stolen from them and hated her, wanting her out of their lives. She declared that she was leaving for a few days and demanded that Peter and his son leave the house. While she portrayed herself as the victim, in reality, she was manipulating the situation. Peter, feeling scared and unsure, apologized to her and embraced her. The next day, they sat down with Gustav to get to the bottom of his allegations about Anne. Peter started by apologizing for not always being the perfect father, but he expressed his happiness that their circumstances had brought them back together. The accusation against Anne was serious, and Gustav insisted he wasn't lying about their relationship. Peter felt torn, as it seemed he might believe Anne over Gustav. He told Gustav that their family needed to be built on trust, and if he couldn't contribute to that, it would be hard for him to stay with them. When Anne tried to speak to him, Gustav spat on her and stormed out. Anne then decided it was time for him to leave. Gustav left the house and went back to Stockholm. Peter was left with a deep sense of pain regarding his son, feeling as though he had failed to support him when he most needed it. Several days later, Sarah visited Anne and shared that she had moved in with a foster family until her father could receive treatment. She thanked Anne for her support. Eventually, Anne's life returned to its near-perfect state. However, she was surprised to find Gustav waiting for her at her workplace one day. Anne remained calm as Gustav demanded she tell Peter the truth, or he would report her. She dismissively told him he had no proof and that no one would believe him. Realizing Anne had the upper hand, Gustav understood there was nothing he could do. At this point, Anne's actions had crossed from being morally questionable to downright reprehensible. A few days later, Gustav returned, visibly upset and screaming, wanting to speak to Peter. Anne, however, told him to leave. He left, crying. A few days later, they threw a party to honor Peter and Anne for their dedication to helping young people. During the party, Peter's ex-wife, Rebecca, called him to say that she couldn't find Gustav. Alarmed, they decided to report him as missing. After Gustav had been missing for some time, the police contacted Peter and asked him to come with Rebecca. Peter went and returned the same day, bearing tragic news. He explained that a hunter had discovered Gustav's body in the forest near their country house. An autopsy revealed that he had overdosed on drugs. Peter was heartbroken and blamed himself for his son's death, believing it was because he had forced Gustav out of the house. Anne broke down crying, and from that point on, she kept seeing visions of Gustav. Her relationship with Peter started to deteriorate. What she had feared most came true. She lost everything she cherished. This marked a tragic end, with severe consequences for all involved.